Welcome to Voices for Change 2.0, the only podcast that focuses on mental health while mixing in movies, music, books, sports, and pop culture. Here are your hosts, Rebecca and Joe Lombardo.
Hey, good morning, and welcome to Voices for Change 2.0.
Hey there, good morning. Thank you for joining us on this fine weekend.
We hope you guys are enjoying your day.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, it's funny, I got to mention this really quick, babe.
Okay.
You know, we've got our intro and our wonderful announcer that says we're the only podcast that mixes in movies and music and all that stuff that he says. And it occurs to me, we need to do that more.
Yeah, it would be good.
That would be good.
Well, we're doing it today. So.
Yes, yes, we are. Absolutely.
So let's just go with that.
Okay.
Recently, Joe and I had the pleasure of viewing a mental health documentary called Healing Voices. It presents a different perspective than any of the other films that we've seen on this topic. Today we're talking with the director of Healing Voices, P.J. Moynihan. He began this journey as a filmmaker with a vision, but he has become an advocate with a mission. So please welcome PJ to the show.
Good morning.
Hey there.
Thank you both for having me. We'll settle into our flow here shortly.
Yeah, we will. We'll get the hang of it here.
Yep.
If you don't have any questions for us, we're going to just go ahead and dive right in.
Let's go for it.
Okay.
Sweet.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and describe your role in this project?
Sure. So the name of my production company is Digitalized Film. I started the company right out of college in 2003, where we produce independent media, mainly documentaries, but, we also produce what I like to refer as social impact media for kind of a global client base. And I really believe in the power of media to affect change and measurable and meaningful change in our world and in our societies. So that's really, kind of what our niche has become over about 13 or 14 years. So we work on projects large and small, but, this particular film that we're here to discuss today, Healing Voices, this has been a project that we've been working on for going on 6-7 years, I think, at this point. And, it's not uncommon for an independent film to have sort of that sort of life cycle from conception to distribution. And, we spent about 5 years producing the film, and we've spent a good part of the last 1.5 to 2 years, marketing and self-releasing the film. So, as an independent production company, we're not just producing media, we're also delivering it. And part of what I hope we can talk about today is how we've approached kind of the delivery system with Healing Voices, which has proven really effective, and I think really kind of allowed the film to resonate with people in such a way that probably wouldn't have been prone to if it followed more traditional distribution paths.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we can absolutely discuss that. I have no problem with that at all. Can you talk a little bit about what Healing Voices is about?
Sure. So Healing Voices is a social action documentary about mental health. Social action in the sense that, we produced the film going back to about 2010 when myself and Oryx Cohen, who's my co-producer, decided to embark down this path. Oryx is also one of the subjects in the film. Because we really believe there was a need to, kind of have a different conversation than we're having socially, culturally about mental health. Oryx and some of his colleagues here, I'm based in Massachusetts. I'm in Western Massachusetts. I live in Northampton. And I had the good fortune of meeting Oryx and his friend Will Hall, who were doing some pretty radical work here, around mental health advocacy and activism. They had started an organization called the Freedom Center, and the Freedom Center was a group of folks who who were meeting on the grassroots, in church basements, kind of just very on their own, and they were looking at ways to kind of rethink madness and just kind of reevaluate how we respond to people who are in emotional and psychological crisis. And a lot of these people had been through the traditional mental health system and had found that the traditional way of responding didn't necessarily work for them. And even for some of them, they felt they had been harmed by the system. So it was really a very grassroots approach towards saying, how can we, as people who have been through a particular set of experiences, kind of band together and come up with better solutions than the solutions that were provided to us in our time of need. So Healing Voices is really, it kind of chronicles the story. It chronicles the story of three individuals. We follow them over about 5 years, and there are Oryx is one of the subjects in the film. There's a woman named Jen Constantine, who is a mother and an activist living out in South Dakota, who's one of the subjects of the film, and a young man named Dan Sullivan, who lives in my neck of the woods here in Amherst, Massachusetts, who's the third subject in the film. And the film follows these individuals over the course of their lives and kind of explores with them how, they have found sort of their own ways to live with the experiences that are commonly labeled, serious mental illness or psychosis or schizophrenia. So it's, one of the nice things about doing the film over a longer sort of trajectory, so it took about 5 years to fully produce it, is that, you kind of see things happen in people's lives over that course of time. And we really wanted the film to be character-centric and not just, kind of more of a traditional talkie-talkie documentary, though there is that element to the film as well.
Great.
Actually, my next question was about the social action initiative part. So what does that mean to you specifically as it pertains to this film, just so we kind of get that out there for people so that they understand it fully?
Sure. So to me, the social action piece is, presenting a different way of looking at these experiences than most people have been presented, in terms of, what they're hearing from maybe their doctors or their families or, kind of society in general. So the action is to get people to think somewhat differently, and acknowledge that these are sort of human experiences that affect all of us at different ways and in different times. And the action that we've really organized around Healing Voices is, the film being followed by community dialogues. So, the film is meant to evoke dialogue. It's meant to, kind of challenge some people's beliefs or maybe validate others, or open up these opportunities for conversation, where and sometimes difficult conversations. But, we have structured a business model where the film has been screening since we released it last spring in April, all over the world. There's been between 400 and 500 screenings at this point, and every single screening has been followed by a discussion. There's usually some sort of panel that is constituted from people that organize the screening or maybe some local stakeholders in the mental health or public health communities. But it's really meant to engage the audience, the people that have sat there and watched the film for 90 minutes. Many of whom are showing up at these events because they've been touched by these issues in their life in some way, and in a range of ways. From healthcare professionals to working within the traditional systems to family members looking for solutions to people that are that are maybe not necessarily in crisis in that moment, but looking for other ways of understanding and their experiences. So the action is the dialogue, and the action is really bringing communities together. I think this is a bit of a lost art in the sense that I don't think there are many events in people's local communities where the intention is to come together in order to have an experience and then participate in sort of a town hall style discussion. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm saying for us to kind of organize it around a film has been a very interesting model to watch unfold. And I think there's been a real measurable impact in communities that has come out of these screenings, everywhere from, Iceland to New York City to Los Angeles to Australia, where they really seem to like the film. I mean, it's kind of taken on a life of its own in many ways, but it's also because we had a particular framework for how we thought the film would be well utilized. We didn't just want to release this thing immediately and have people watching it in their living rooms. We've actually withheld it for the last year from sort of, consumer purchase, let's say, the $9.99 download or the $4.99 rental, because we wanted the action to be about people coming together and experiencing the film and responding to it. And just, we had while I'm on the subject, we had a really great example of that last night. We had a screening not far from where I live in Millbury, Massachusetts. I'm in Northampton in the Pioneer Valley. Boston's on the other side of the state. Millbury is like somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And on a rainy Monday night here in New England, we had 150 people come out into a great independent local theater. We had 4 or 5 state legislators there. We had the area director for the Department of Mental Health on our panel. We had a bunch of local sponsors who represented not just mental health, but Disability Action America, Our Revolution Grafton, Asian Women for Health, the Kiva Center, and the Central Mass Recovery Learning Community were peer-run organization. They were the presenting sponsor. There were some other mental health-related sponsors. So really a diverse constituency of people, and it just, I think, speaks to how these issues affect everyone in every area of public health, in every area of day-to-day life. And so I think that what we've seen through the business model of doing these community events is that people are ready for this message. And it's not just the people that, are kind of most directly impacted by these issues.
Yeah,
that's amazing that you've got that diverse of groups coming in and participating in it. And I think it's awesome that, you've got it kind of, how do I want to put it? You bring it one community at a time. You know what I mean? You're absolutely right that there isn't the sense of community that there used to be, 50, 60 years ago, where you could have, some type of town hall discussion locally that people in the community will come together and talk about various things. And, especially
not mental health.
Exactly. And to have that type of subject and so many different people coming out to discuss it is just, it's awesome.
It's extremely important because that's what we're all doing. We're all working towards the time when it is something that we can just discuss and there's no stigma related to it, and everybody can be together and present their opinion in a logical and intelligent way.
And compassionate way.
A compassionate way, obviously, yes, without, being made to feel as if they're less than because they may have a mental illness.
Yeah, or to be judged or
exactly. And
anything like that.
When you're speaking about your event last night, I want to put out there for anyone that's listening in our area in Detroit, Michigan, Joe and I are looking to do one of these screening events ourselves, and we need some help. So if you guys, if you know anybody or
or you want to participate,
exactly.
Please reach out to us.
We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Our website is www.voices-for-change.net. You can reach us that way. And, let us know if you want to give us a hand with it, because I know PJ would love to see the documentary travel all the way to the Detroit area.
Absolutely. Hey, PJ, in the film, there are times when people refer to themselves as survivors of psychiatry. Would you talk a bit about this point of view?
Sure. I think, that refers to people that have been through the the traditional mental health system, that feel that the system was harmful to them as opposed to helpful to them. And so that, includes, many people who have had really traumatic experiences in hospitals, people that have, kind of been forced to take medication against their will. And there really is kind of a grassroots global movement of folks who identify as such that are not just saying, hey, look at what's wrong with this system, that are also, very creatively and passionately, trying to bring forth solutions for themselves, for their loved ones, for communities, so that, people don't end up having have to go down the same path that they did. I know, obviously one of the things, having shown the movie so many times and having had all these dialogues, I want to be very clear that we are respectful of anyone's choices, That that what the film is saying largely is there is no one way, and that's the message that we're trying to get out there. But it's not about saying the traditional thing is wrong, and if you believe it, there's something wrong with you. You got to think this other way. I mean, that is that's the sort of trap that I think a lot of documentaries fall into, is sort of thought policing, and this is not that. I absolutely believe there's a place for medication and all this. I absolutely believe there's a place for doctors and all this. I absolutely believe people have the right to acknowledge what works for them. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that just because something is working for a certain set of people or for any one individual, it doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone else. And so,
right.
I believe there's sort of a real lack of diversity and a real lack of options that are presented to people in terms of that moment when they're most vulnerable and they're in crisis. I mean, you guys have interviewed a lot of people, and have a lot of, let's say, skin in the game in this world. And I would imagine you agree that people know what works for them, right? And so,
right. Absolutely,
and so I just think it's important that we listen to everybody in the equation. And one of the key constituents of folks that have been coming to these screenings are healthcare workers. There are many healthcare workers, people working as psychiatric nurses or in sort of traditional settings, that are saying, I'm here because I want to be able to provide more solutions to the people that come in crisis. And when someone's in crisis, they're vulnerable, whether it's a family member seeking help for a loved one or somebody being brave enough to seek help for themselves. That's a real point of vulnerability. And so, we just want to be really clear that the message I believe that people are given in many cases is a very powerful message that is kind of inherently negative. Sort of a disease model approach, I believe, has a certain effect on someone's psychology and how they are going to respond to whatever it is that they're going through. And so we're saying that there are spiritual elements to these experiences. We're saying that there are a huge level of trauma and a lot of early childhood trauma in terms of people that end up in crisis. I mean, I think we live in a very, very complex and complicated society. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s. I'm just glad that there wasn't social media when I was in high school, because I can't imagine what it's like to be a kid right now. I mean, it's just there's this constant. We live in this comparison culture where everyone's just trying to build an image of themselves, and when you don't live up to that image, you just feel like you're failing in some way. And I just I have young kids and a daughter who is just started in college, and I mean, it's really just, I think, a challenging time and place and day and time to be alive in America in particular. And I think all this stuff comes into play when we talk about mental health.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for the kids out there, they're under a lot of pressure. Like you mentioned, with social media and whatnot. Especially
if they themselves have found out that they have a condition or are afraid that they have some type of a condition. There's already such a standard that they're feeling that they're being withheld, held up to.
And then it gets compounded.
Exactly, by something, by a disease or a condition, and it makes them feel like an outsider. And, then there's the other kids who, are the bullies and, bullying people on the internet. And it's just, I agree with you. I can't imagine, it was hard enough going to school without the internet. I can't even imagine what it would be like nowadays, dealing with
having to deal with that on top of, everything else. When we're living in a day and age where kids are committing suicide because of how they're being bullied over social media, and that's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying.
It is. And on a personal level, I know, PJ, I spoke to you a little bit about the last time we talked about my situation, and, that I was diagnosed at 19 with bipolar disorder, and there was a brief period of time when I wasn't seeing anyone after Joe and I first got married because we didn't have insurance. I just kind of lost my way. And when I finally broke down and went to look for help, we couldn't find help to save our lives. Everybody just told us, just go to the emergency room. There's nothing else you can do. So I've been on that side of it. I've also been on the side where I did find some positive help and was, so grateful for that. So when I watched the film, and like I was mentioning to you, Joe and I paused it so many times because you're right about the dialogue aspect of it, because we talked literally about every few minutes of the film that we watched. We'd pause it and talk to each other about it because we both had been through it together. We've been together for 15 years, so he's been, by my side through a lot of my, mental illness, ups and downs, right? So, the dialogue aspect of it is certainly there, and I think it's very important.
Well, and you're saying, I'm sorry to interrupt, Joe. Go ahead.
No, go ahead,
problem.
PJ.
No problem, please.
No, I was just going to say, I articulated how these community dialogues are happening, but the example you're citing, I mean, those. I'm sure there are just as many meaningful conversations that will happen in people's living rooms when they're able to watch the film this way, as have happened in sort of out in the public with these events that we've been doing. So that is, I just want to acknowledge that that's also, to me, that's also part of the action too. Is it's not just about organizing an event and bringing together the community. That it's also about, I hope that the film is this. It's sort of like a window for people to talk about things, and maybe in different ways than they had been talking about them before.
Absolutely.
And so that's really how we hope it can be utilized as a tool. We think of this as a social tool that we've created. And yes, it is just an entertainment product. It's just a movie after all, and we're marketing it like a movie and doing a lot of the things that many other films that have no social mission are also doing, like working with a publicist and trying to figure out what, tell our story and, make sure that the thing gets out there. But, that's the residual effect of how it can impact people's lives is why we believe it's more a tool than a product.
You're right.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to have to take a quick break. We will be playing Brandon and James, Unchained Melody. We'll be right back.
My darling,
Hey, welcome back to Voices for Change 2.0. I'm Joe. She's Rebecca. That wonderful gentleman over there is PJ. And PJ created the movie Healing Voices. So we were talking earlier about, I'm trying to remember how I want to come into this, the whole medical aspect. And you had mentioned that, you know, psychiatric nurses were coming and seeing the screenings, and they were looking for new and different ways to approach their patients and stuff. And it got me thinking about something. And what that thought is, you know, you get a physical ailment. You break your arm, you come down with diabetes, you develop cancer. And generally, these physical ailments, there's maybe one or maybe a limited number, just a few different ways of treating them. And it's pretty consistent for people, regardless of, you know, age, race, whatever. When it comes to mental health, and this is nobody's opinion but my own, okay? So anybody in the medical community, you know, can get mad at me if you want. But it seems like the medical field doesn't necessarily consider that when you're dealing with mental health issues, you know, you can't pigeonhole it the way you would a broken arm or something. You know, you have to be open to, you know, the fact that you're dealing with the human brain, and it's so complex. And, you know, treatment A isn't going to work for treatment. You know, treatment A won't work for patient A, but it might work for patient B and C, and you have to modify it and make it treatment B for patient D, stuff like that. You know, it's just something for them to be aware of, that, you know, to be open-minded. You know, maybe medication wouldn't work for this person, but therapy would, or you know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm not articulating myself really well on this, but what are your thoughts, PJ? How do you feel about my jumbled, garbled mess of what I'm trying to say?
I very much agree with you. I mean, you know, I would take it one step further and say we're not just dealing with the brain; we're dealing with just human consciousness. Mm-hmm. You know, and all that goes with it. I mean, these are really experiences of consciousness. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's problematic to try and plug people's relationship to the world as they go through it, good, bad, or indifferent, into sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think that's a lot of where, you know, that's why you have people identifying as survivors of psychiatry. It's why you have, you know, sort of patient movements rising up around the world, and things happening on the grassroots, because there's, you know, there have just pulled that approach hasn't worked for. And I just think that the brain is a much more complex organism than the arm, or than, you know, or, I mean, I think when someone ends up with a physical illness, in many ways you can kind of trace back how, you know, kind of how this happened, and how this came to happen, and how you treat it medically. And, you know, I think that part of what's gotten lost in sort of in the world of traditional mental health treatment is the discovery process of what landed the person here in the first place. You know, in terms of, you know, what experiences in their life kind of got them to this point. And when, you know, when people kind of get to that point of entry with the service system, the mental health service system, it's just really responding to, at that time, the doctors are responding to symptoms, you know, what are perceived as symptoms, whether it's hearing voices or depression or however the symptoms are presenting themselves. And so, you know, kind of treating the symptoms without trying to understand where the symptoms have come from. I mean, if you're someone who has diabetes, you know, you probably have eaten too much sugar in your life. You know, so you probably have to start to make some changes in your dietary habits. And, you know, in terms of people that have, you know, in my words, kind of found their own path to healing outside of the traditional treatment system, I mean, there's no one size fits all modality there. But what's very, very common is people saying it was this number of things that, you know, it was going back and kind of, you know, healing from some early childhood trauma, or acknowledging that that's what was at play here. For some people, it's about making lifestyle changes. and and finding things like meditation, yoga, dietary practices. I mean, I think it really is just about a approach to kind of whole person health. That's probably not the right way of saying that, but I mean, it's just really, people finding ways to just live healthier in their lives. It seems to be as effective as as just throwing drugs at a problem. And so I just believe these are human conditions, and that every single one of us is capable of any sort of psychosis, given the right things or the wrong things happening to us at a given time.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It changes for all of us as we go along the path, as well. Something that worked for us in our 20s may not work for us in our 40s. So you can't, like you both were saying, pigeonhole these diseases, because it's ever changing for each individual person. It's not just one group of people and this one thing works for this group of people. Mm-hmm. You break an arm, you put it in a cast usually, and that's pretty standard.
Yep.
Your brain isn't functioning properly, or you have a chemical imbalance, that changes all the time.
Exactly. And I think if you put my brain in a cast, I'd probably stop breathing, and that wouldn't be good. So.
Yeah, and but then the broken arm analogy comes back to this conversation around like access to treatment. Certainly also people should have access to healthcare when it comes to this type of thing. And so I'm not saying we need to completely take it out of that category, but I think that it's much more nuanced than sort of this traditional one-size-fits-all approach. And I just think that's gotten lost. And I think, again, coming back to these dialogues, they're as much about listening as they are about talking. And mm-hmm. So, I think that in many ways what people who are in real crisis need is just they need accompaniment. They need someone to listen to them and really kind of meet them where they're at. And that doesn't really happen often, I believe, in the sort of I'm in crisis, I'm now in the ER, and then maybe in an institution following that. There's really no sort of compassionate response, I guess, when it comes to seeking traditional services.
You're so right on that.
Yeah, that's
seeing what Beck's gone through over the last 15 years alone, I can personally vouch for everything you just said.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, during the course of the film, it's sort of based on three people and their experiences, and then they talk to folks that have been through similar experiences, and a lot of them have said that they felt sort of forced into taking medication, or their only option was medication, or their only option was this particular type of treatment. So is it safe to say that the people that the film focuses on are not trying to say that, everyone should stop taking their medications or stop seeking treatments if it's been successful for them?
No, all they're saying is that medication has not worked for them, is all they're saying. Mm-hmm. and so these are not the narratives that really have made their way into the dominant culture. So again, that was one of our primary motivations for making the film, was just to let people know that these stories exist, that people actually do hear voices and live with those voices and learn to healthily live with those voices in constructive ways, and they're not just looking to get rid of those voices because there's some symptom of a disease. Mm-hmm. That this kind of falls under the diversity of human experience, and I think that one of the things we really try to address in some way in the film is just the acknowledgement that, like, where is this line between, like pharmaceutical drugs and recreational drugs? I mean, these are all psychoactive drugs, mm-hmm. And so, different drugs affect different people in different ways. I mean, some people drink coffee in the morning, some people don't. Some people use cannabis. Some people, they'd smoke a joint and go into, that end up in the ER having a panic attack. So we respond to different substances in different ways as well. And psychiatric medications are a substance. And many people find the substance is very, very helpful in terms of being able to live the lives that they want to live.
Right.
But I also think we've kind of gone, and this is not just endemic to mental health. I mean, you could say this for a lot of healthcare, especially here in America, that we've really gone down this path of just looking for quick solutions. You can say it about other aspects of the culture. It's why we eat fast food. It's why we like to simplify things. And so certainly the drug treatment for psychosis is it is that. I believe it kind of reflects kind of who we are, maybe in a way culturally, in many ways. And we also, we also exist in the context of a for-profit healthcare system. So I think a lot of the issues that are inherent that are problematic about sort of the mental health treatment system are also problematic in other areas of healthcare, where you have a healthcare system that is basically set up to profit from disease, and so there's this lack of investment in keeping people well. It's not really it's not a wellness system; it's a disease treatment system. So people come in and they we treat whatever whatever ails them, but we're not just trying to keep people out of the doctor's office and teach them and work with them to lead healthy and meaningful, I don't want to say healthy lives. There's a lot of lifestyle stuff here that I think is at play. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm pretty sure that from the pharmaceutical standpoint, we're not looked at as so much as patients as we are consumers. And that's kind of a scary thing, when you consider the record profits that pharmaceutical companies make on an annual basis. And not to start sounding all political about it, I'm just making a point, that, sometimes we're almost forced to consider other forms of treatment at times, and it's not to say that if the medication is working for you and you're taking it, by all means keep taking it. That's, absolutely, do what you need to do to help yourself. But I'm also reminded of a scene in the movie where I think it was Dan mentioned that, when he was taking one of the medications, he didn't feel like himself anymore. And once he had stopped taking it, he started feeling like himself again. And I've seen that with Rebecca. There was a medication that she was on years ago that, I don't know, it just, she wasn't her. She was a little numb. And, and we figured out that the medication was having a few other effects on her as well besides that. And once she stopped taking it, she was her again. So I absolutely understand that it's messing with your brain chemistry, sometimes to your benefit, sometimes to your detriment.
And again, there's substances. I mean, Rebecca, to come all the way back to your question about, our, since the characters, the subjects of the film, they're kind of advocating, medication didn't work for them. It doesn't mean necessarily that the message is everyone go throw away your medication. I mean, that's a risky proposition. I mean, these are very, very powerful drugs, and they're very addictive. I mean, people can't just go and throw away their Suboxone or throw away the alcohol. I mean, this is, these are powerful drugs, and they also have addictive qualities to them. So, I mean, there is a real risk of anyone just throwing away their medication, because these are very powerful things that should be treated as such. I certainly at any stages do not want to underestimate how challenging it will be for anybody to stop taking psychiatric medication. The same way that it's challenging for anybody to, stop using any substance that by its nature is, highly addictive.
Right.
I've been there many times, and there's nothing easy about coming off of, especially a medication that I've been on for over 20 years. I've tried to wean myself off of it because it caused so much weight gain, and I was violently ill for a very long time. So I've seen it and I've been there. So.
Yeah.
And I would want to acknowledge a very, very powerful resource for people that is free, that's available online. It's called The Harm Reduction Guide to Coming Off of Psychiatric Drugs. And it's a manual that you can download as a free PDF for The Harm Reduction Guide for Coming Off of Psychiatric Drugs. And it's published by the Icarus Project, who's a sort of a social justice and advocacy organization around mental health. But it really, it's one of the few pieces of literature that exists that really, approaches this, how do I successfully navigate the experience of trying to come off psychiatric drugs based upon what's worked for other people. And so it's a very valuable resource that people can check out. And even the word harm reduction in the title, that comes back to the addiction recovery community and this approach towards ending our use of substances as maybe the net goal or the immediate goal, but sort of changing our relationship to them and taking more of a harm reduction approach than saying it's just, it's either I'm on my medication or I'm throwing it into the garbage. Because many people try and come off psychiatric drugs and can't do it successfully because it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And you need to have a social support network in place. You need to have people around you who understand how difficult what you're trying to do is. And there are some people that can do it cold turkey. There are some people that it takes years and years and years. I mean, I've heard that benzodiazepines are harder to withdraw from than heroin.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that resource. That's definitely important. I'm glad that we got that out there.
Yeah. Hey, PJ, would you talk with us a bit about the three people that the film focuses on, Jen, Dan, and Oryx?
Yep. So starting with Oryx, Oryx is one of the co-producers of the film. He's really been my partner on this project going back to the very beginning. And, he was never really – he was always going to kind of be in the movie in some way because he's an activist. He works for an organization called the National Empowerment Center, which is, they're helping peer groups get off the ground in different parts of the country. They're actually federally funded. And so Oryx is doing some really meaningful work and is kind of on the front lines of this, the survivor movement. So he was always going to kind of be a subject in the film as well, but it just kind of turned out because of how things played out with his own personal life. He became maybe more of a subject in the film than we had even envisioned him to be. Dan Sullivan is someone who lives here around me locally. It's always kind of nice when you make a film like this to have a subject you don't have to get on a plane to go shoot with. So Dan is just a young man that I met, many years ago who I just deeply, deeply admire. He's just so articulate and wise and funny and sweet and just a really great human being. And and he has a way of he's a Brazilian man who is living here in Amherst, Massachusetts, and he's in his late 20s now, mid to late 20s. And Dan is someone who has lived with voices for and visions for his entire life, and he can really speak to these things in such a way that very few people I've ever encountered have the ability to just kind of articulate these experiences with such humor and good nature and insightfulness. So he really was just a wonderful, wonderful subject for the film. And Jen is somebody who lives out in Rapid City, South Dakota, who is a mother who's also an activist. And I met her through work. I was out there doing some work for her organization, and we just met and struck up a friendship. And we certainly it was nice to have sort of a Midwestern, Middle America type archetype. Also, someone who's a mother in the film. These Oryx, Jen, and Dan, they've all been given the most serious of diagnoses. Bipolar, schizoaffective schizophrenia, and they've all, in their own ways, found strategies to kind of navigate through life. And I will say that I believe, after all this work and seeing, listening to thousands of people's stories over many years, that one common thread that you can't do without here is having a social support network. People really need a social support network when they go through hard times. And that's one of the things that I think brings a lot of people back to life, back to the universe, back to a sense of meaning, is just really finding other people to connect with that they can rely on in times of need. You guys are very fortunate to have each other. But I think that's one of the.
We are, yeah.
but but not everybody has that. And so I think some of the people that really, not speaking just for the characters in the film, but the people that really continue to struggle with finding the right supports. I mean, so much of it is about trying to build that social support network. And what a lot of these peer-run organizations, by peer I mean people who have been through the mental health system and are now trying to, in some ways, are on the other side of it, but are trying to help people that are in the same situation that they've been in, because they've been there. And so there's a real peer movement here in the U.S., much more so than in many other countries. And it's kind of really grounded in this notion that create the importance of that social support network. And a lot of these sort of grassroots organizations that exist all over the country, one of the main things they do on a community level is provide events for the public, provide training for people, provide these opportunities for people to come together and build some life skills, but also to find connections so they can help grow that social support network.
Absolutely. And on that note, we are going to have to take one more quick break. It'll be our last break. You'll be listening to Andrew Heller, Summer Wind.
The summer wind came blowing in from across the sea. It lingered there to touch your hair and walk with me. All summer long we sang a song and then we strolled that golden sand. Sweetheart and the summer wind, like painted kites, those days and nights they went flying by. The world was new beneath a blue umbrella sky. Softer than a piper man, one day it called to you. I lost you to the summer wind. The autumn wind and the winter wind, they have come and gone. Those lonely days, they go on and on. And guess who sang his lullaby through nights that never end? My fickle friend, the summer wind, the summer wind. Warm summer wind, the summer wind.
Hey there, welcome back to Voices for Change 2.0. We are so glad that you are with us today.
Yes, we are.
We are speaking to a gentleman by the name of P.J. Moynihan. He's the director of Healing Voices, a documentary about mental health. And P.J., you have some big news. You have a huge event coming up based around the film, May 2nd through May 4th. Would you like to talk a little bit about that for our listeners in case they are interested?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So Healing Voices has been screening all over the world for the last year. There's been between 400 and 500 screenings, large and small, by this point. They've all been followed by these really, really powerful community dialogues that are in response to the issues that the film evokes. So in a sense, Healing Voices is still in theaters, if you think about it in relationship to a traditional movie. You haven't been able to buy the film as a digital download for $9.99 or on DVD, apart from at some special events. So we really have withheld it as a consumer product through this window of wanting the film to be kind of event-based. It's a social action initiative, and so to us, the action was bringing communities together. And so instead of playing at the local multiplex in Regal Cinemas or wherever, we've been showing in colleges and in community centers and doing some of our own theatrical events. So we really just kind of redefined what it meant to be in a theatrical window for a film such as ours. And it's kind of radical in terms of, a film like ours making its way to market. There are other companies that are doing similar things, like Tug is doing similar sort of on-demand screenings in communities, and there's a company called Gather who's really, sort of focusing on non-theatrical events for films such as ours. We've really done all this ourselves as the production company, but we're also now the distribution company. And so it's been an interesting journey, and what we're doing to kind of close out this theatrical window and mark the film's release on home video, which we'll be selling ourselves directly from our website, healingvoicesmovie.com. That date is May 2nd. The film's going to be available as a consumer product. But we're doing a kind of a big global event to close out this event window, and we're calling it Recovering Community. So we have the dates May 2nd to May 4th on a lot of our marketing materials. Truth be told, people need a bit more flexibility to organize events in terms of finding venues and this and that. So essentially starting late April and running through May, there are going to be screenings of Healing Voices all over the world. There's about 70 or 80 events that are confirmed. There's still an opportunity to produce a screening in your local community by contacting us. All the information is available on our website. And again, these events could be in people's living rooms, they could be in town halls, they could be in independent movie theaters, sort of whatever the event organizer locally chooses. That's what these events turn into. But again, they're all followed by discussion, and they're all tied into this this release of the film on and around on May 2nd. But so for your listeners, there is a very good chance that there'll be screenings coming to their community, especially if they're here in the U.S. And for any sort of local organizers out there, there's still an opportunity to get on this bus and organize a great event. It could be later in May if you need some more lead time. But we're really kind of closing this chapter of Healing Voices' story with this one big event, and we called it Recovering Community because, again, coming back to the social action piece, we really believe the film is carrying a message of recovery. That many of the messages that people get in mental health are kind of inherently negative, and we believe we're the candle bearers of hope here. We're saying that people can and do recover from even the most extreme diagnoses and the most extreme experiences you could imagine. And so, we believe that getting that message to communities to, hopefully start that butterfly effect of social action where someone tells their neighbor about it, their neighbor watches the movie, they have a son who maybe goes into crisis a year later, and that there's this awareness that builds around the many ways in which we need to respond to people in crisis. And it's a message of hope, and it's a message of healing. And I think that it's not hard to acknowledge that in our world today, in March of 2017, there's a lot of healing that needs to take place.
Absolutely.
And so these are really, we believe, very powerful, positive, forward-thinking, galvanizing community events that we're, kind of opening up the opportunity for local people to engage in. And so, if you can't make it to a screening for Recovering Community, there's not one near you. You will be able to buy the film starting on May 2nd. It'll be right through our website, healingvoicesmovie.com. But I do want to encourage any of your listeners who really want to become a part of this conversation to contact us directly through the website and explore of organizing a local event.
And it's timely with matching up with Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes,
in
May is
too.
Mental Health Awareness Month, so that is perfect timing.
Yeah.
Can you give us some of the social media information as well, in case anyone would like to follow you on Twitter and whatnot?
Yep. So we are at Voices Movie on Twitter and on Instagram. We also have a Facebook group and a Facebook fan page. You'll find that just by punching in Healing Voices into Facebook. And certainly those are places where we make information about events available and are trying to build an audience as well. So certainly give us a follow. We'll follow you back. And just stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of noise coming out of the Healing Voices camp in the next 45 days, including some big events. We're doing a big screening at Yale University on May 2nd. It's, in a 350-seat theater in front of a whole lot of medical professionals. We'll be live streaming that panel and Q&A.
That won't be intimidating at all.
We're doing a large event in New York City on May 13th, which we're going to be announcing this week. There's going to be a big screening in Melbourne, Australia on May 4th. That panel will also be live streamed. So there's going to be a lot of action coming out of our camp, like I said, in the next 6 weeks or so, as we, amidst all other things, treat ourselves like any other movie that's trying to get released, and just make sure that people know about it is really what it comes down to at this point. We're confident in what the film is, and we believe it carries a very important message, and now we just want people to know that it exists.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're definitely getting your message out there, and I think that's amazing, and I congratulate you and everyone involved in the project. I think that it's important that everyone sees the film that has any questions about mental illness, that deals with mental illness, has a family member, a friend, themselves has been diagnosed with something. I think it's really, really important to view all aspects of the mental health community so that you're educated and you know what is and isn't stigma. And that's, what I was saying before, that's what we're all here for. That's what we're all trying to avoid.
Yeah. So,
we congratulate you on being able to come to bring the film on such large scales,
Yeah, and what you have coming up is all very, very exciting too. Some great events coming up. If this stuff is happening in your area, by all means, search it out, check it out. It's worth your time. It's worth the discussion.
And again, that's www.healingvoicesmovie.com is where you can find the information for the film. But it looks like we are about out of time with you today, PJ, but we are really grateful that you were with us today, and you have been a fantastic guest and given us so much valuable information. I can't wait for the feedback on the show.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time today with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to be connected, and thank you both for the work that you're doing. We're all just trying to create a healthier world for ourselves to grow up in, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, we got to grow up? I don't want to grow up.
So if you'll just stay on the line, we are going to finish up, and we will talk to you guys next week.
Yep.
Have a great day.
See ya.
Join us next week as Rebecca and Joe continue to battle the stigma of mental illness. Follow us on Twitter at Voices for Change RJ and on Facebook at Voices for Change 2.0.